Huge news! Wizards of the Coast has brought Pioneer to Arena! Isn't that awesome? Amazing! Or at least it would be if it were true. Sadly, the truth is that Wizards of the Coast has added only a handful of cards and declared their mission accomplished. As for the other 2,000 plus Pioneer cards that are still missing from Arena, don't think about that. However, I still think this is a good thing because after 6 years of not having Pioneer on Arena, Wizards has actually worked to build enough of the format onto the client that yes, competitively speaking, you can now more or less have a one-to-one bridge between paper and digital. You can now play Pioneer on Arena so long as you are net decking and not rogue brewing. For 3 years, Magic Arena players who have wanted to play with their post-rotation standard cards in a true-to-paper format have had only one way to do so: the almost Pioneer format Explorer. But Wizards of the Coast has been hard at work, bringing many Pioneer-relevant cards to Explorer, either via remastered versions of Pioneer blocks like Kaladesh and Amonkhet, or by way of anthology sets of about 20 cards each. The largest push occurred last December with the fully draftable Pioneer Masters, which contained a whopping 278 cards legal in Pioneer that had previously been unavailable on Magic Arena. In other words, Explorer had gradually been becoming Pioneer. Many liked to joke that it wasn't Pioneer so much as Pioneer, and at the very least, the top decks in the format reflected this. For example, the 50 Explorer deck lists registered in the recent Arena Championship were virtually identical to their Pioneer equivalents. And so now, at long last, the big day is here. Pioneer fully comes to Arena, with Wizards of the Coast releasing 11 more cards? I'm sorry, they only added 11 cards here? 11? And have officially declared that they, quote-unquote, achieved their goal of unifying Explorer and Pioneer. Moving forward on Arena, Explorer will be renamed Pioneer, and the format's ban list will be adjusted to match paper Pioneers. So there you have it. Pioneer is on Arena, except for the 2,000 missing cards. So there's more than 2,000 Pioneer cards missing from Arena Pioneer, but the cards needed to run the top competitive decks are all there. If we've got that, do we really need the rest? I'd actually argue that, yeah, we do. The key and joy to Magic is not just playing the top cards and the top decks, but it's being able to brew, to discover new things, new cards, new ideas, but without the rest of Pioneer, can many Magic the Gathering players still do this? Does Pioneer on Arena limit its players so that they no longer can innovate, so that they are now stifled in the format? Or does Wizards of the Coast actually have a plan for this? A plan to keep growing Pioneer on Arena, keep adding cards, even bad cards, or cards that happen to win tournaments against the odds, to their digital client? Is this announcement just the start of finally achieving a true one-to-one bridge between paper, Pioneer, and digital? Let's discuss, because I have many opinions, all of them strong. In paper Magic, Pioneer is a format that consists of every card from every set that has come through Standard, starting with Return to Ravnica and going through to the present day. Like all formats, Pioneer has a ban list, and Pioneer's ban list is particularly distinct in that all of the fetch lands are banned, both for the purposes of ease of tournament play as well as just affordability of the format. On Arena, Pioneer consists of every card from every set that's come through Standard from Return to Ravnica to present, but also, in fairness, minus those 2,302 cards that are legal in Paper Pioneer but have not yet been added to Arena Pioneer. The missing cards are missing because they have not proven themselves to be competitively viable. And Wizards of the Coast has said that about once or twice a year, any Pioneer legal card not on Arena that shows up on a deck list, by the way of performing well in a competitive event, either on Magic Online, which by the way has full Pioneer, and also full Modern, and also full Legacy, and also you can play Commander and multiplayer formats. Hopper's on there too. Anyway, this is about Arena, not Magic Online. But any Pioneer legal card performing well in a competitive Magic Online event or paper event will supposedly get added to Magic Arena. Eventually. It is true that relative to the competitive experience of playing Pioneer on Arena, there is no functional difference between Arena and Paper Pioneer. With the addition of Pioneer Masters, Explorer included 99.95% of all cards registered at Pioneer Regional Championships worldwide last fall. Many, really most, of the Pioneer legal cards not on Arena are not very good. The vast majority are draft chaff, jank, or otherwise weak and overcosted cards. But does that mean their absence is insignificant? I mean, it's only 2,302 cards out of over 12,000 legal Pioneer cards, Michael. How important could they be? 2,302 cards is a lot of cards, and not all of them are totally unplayable. Reality Smasher, for example, as well as Eldrazi Obligator and Spatial Contortion were all modern playable cards for a long time. They are not on Magic Arena, despite being Pioneer legal. Silumgar's Scorn saw some experimentation after Kaldheim was released for its synergy with Goldspan Dragon. And it's not out of the question that Doomwake Giant could be a relevant card in the 5-color enigmatic incarnation deck at some point down the road. It certainly is a shame that you can't do Rogue Brews with cards like these. Goblin Piledriver and Gnarlroot Trapper are valuable role players in their respective Kindred decks. Now, granted, neither goblins nor elves are currently competitively viable archetypes, but you know what? A lot of Magic players just want to play with goblins and elves, and they want to try and brew up that special list that makes them competitively viable. And not having cards like Piledriver on Arena makes it so that one of the key aspects of playing any format is missing on Arena: the ability to brew up creative brews and not just net deck. There are also a lot of cards that are good in other formats and contexts. Axebane Guardian, for instance, is a cornerstone card to the popular Walls combo, which is played in Pauper. Though it's unlikely Walls combo will win a competitive tournament anytime soon, there are certainly enough Paper Pioneer legal cards to brew a fun Defenders deck that could win games on the Arena ladder. Warden of the First Tree was a standard all-star in its day. Ghirapur Aether Grid has seen modern play. Elixir of Immortality could serve as the sole win con in a mind-numbing control deck, preventing you from ever decking. Hedron Alignment, Magic's version of Yu-Gi-Oh's Exodia, remains missing from Magic Arena as well, and on and on and on. Again, none of these cards are likely to make their way into the top 8 of any Pioneer tournament, but that doesn't make them totally irrelevant. A healthy format ecosystem is a kind of pyramid, with a small collection of the strongest cards at the top and a much wider pool of weaker, more situational cards at the bottom. Now, that wider pool still exists on Arena, but it's just not as wide as it is in Paper. I'm not denying that the vast majority of players can play many games of Pioneer in Paper or on Magic Online where the full Pioneer card pool is available without ever encountering a Goblin Piledriver or a Reality Smasher. More so, I'm making the claim that competitive viability should not be the end-all be-all for justifying a card's existence in a format. The question then is this: how many of those cards that are not currently competitively viable are needed to call a format identical to its Paper counterpart? How many cards can Pioneer miss before it's no longer Pioneer? Before I can answer this question, I do need to address something. There is already precedent for digital versions of Paper formats to be missing some cards. Legacy, for instance, is always missing a few cards on Magic Online due to licensing or programming issues, and those missing cards are often extremely Legacy playable. But that's never been more than a few hundred cards at most. We're talking about well over 2,000 cards missing from Pioneer here. What's more, Pioneer is ostensibly supposed to be one of Magic's premier constructed formats, alongside Standard and Modern. Ideally, the standards would be higher for one of Magic's premier formats than it is for the long-abandoned Legacy. So what should that standard be? Where do you draw the line, and how much should the competitive metagame dictate the line's position? Well, on the one hand, formats are necessarily defined by their competitive metagames. If a card is banned from competitive play, more casually minded players are also barred from using it. It doesn't matter if you had a totally fair and balanced casual vampire deck in Pioneer, that ran Sorin Imperious Bloodlord. If you wanted to continue calling it a Pioneer Vampires deck after Sorin was banned, you'd have to cut him. I think there's also a little bit of a tree falling in the forest effect going on here, if you know what I mean. Wizards must feel like the majority of Pioneer players don't care about cards that aren't competitively viable, and they might not be wrong. Pioneer is just not a very popular format at the moment, in part because Wizards of the Coast hasn't paid very much attention to it. Wizards chose not to include Pioneer as an RCQ format this year, which effectively kills any significant interest in innovation among the majority of the player base. By and large, there aren't that many players who care about Pioneer at all, let alone those who care about the format's fringes. On the other hand, some number of those players do exist. A foundational aspect of constructed Magic has always been the freedom to stray from the beaten path, to experiment with cards that other players might have written off. It's why I play Merfolk. And it's certainly a significant aspect of constructed play at the LGS level. Every LGS has those players who are known for bringing their wacky brews to Friday Night Magic. It's part of the LGS experience. Do those players not matter? The formal shift from Explorer to Pioneer occurred on May 10th. On that day, the card pool of the format, formerly known as Explorer, was 11 cards larger than it was on May 9th. Did the addition of those 11 cards bring Explorer across some kind of transformational threshold? Or is this format still just Explorer, a digital approximation of the Paper Pioneer metagame? Is this still Pioneer, not Pioneer? I'd argue that technically the format is still Explorer. There are currently 12,640 unique cards legal in Pioneer. That means 18% of Pioneer is not on Arena. If the format on Arena has only 82% of the cards from Pioneer, how can you argue that the format is not still just an approximation of Paper Pioneer? That fact hasn't changed, even if the top 3, 10, or 20 decks in the format are present in the metagame. Innovation is the foundational building block of any format. You can't get to the eventual net decking and best decks of a format without the pioneers, no pun intended, some pun intended, of the format brewing with all sorts of unexpected cards. How can we say these formats are the same when one lacks the tools, the very tools necessary for this experimentation? Granted, in the announcement, Wizards of the Coast did specifically say that Explorer has caught up with specifically competitive Pioneer, but that's not the same thing as catching up with Pioneer. If it were, they wouldn't have to specify that it's the competitive format that Explorer has actually caught up with. So if that's the case, why make the change to the format's name? What's gained by calling it Pioneer? Well, there's some clear things gained by officially changing the name of Explorer to Pioneer, despite the cards the format is missing. Of course, it's nice for Wizards of the Coast to get to say that Arena has Pioneer, but I would not feel good about this move if it was purely about corporate messaging. And that's especially true because, as we've already established, the decision to change the name is neither accurate nor without cost. Even beyond what I've already stated about the value of the Brewer's tier of cards, there's an inherent confusion in the two formats sharing a name, but not an identical card pool. The name change also means that the cards missing will likely stay missing unless they prove their competitive viability. That's a shame, especially since competitive viability was not the sole consideration for including cards in the first place. One of the early critiques of the Explorer anthology sets, for instance, was that they invariably included cards that were not Pioneer relevant over cards that were. Hidden Strings did not make its way into Pioneer until December's Master Set, despite Lotus Field Combo being a mainstay of the paper metagame, whereas Shadowborn Apostle was included in the very first Explorer anthology. Before this change, it was always possible that Wizards of the Coast would slip cards from the Brewer's tier into future Arena drops. Maybe they still plan to do that now and then, but the announcement made no mention of it. But even with all my concerns, I'm going to say something that might surprise you. I'm actually in favor of changing the name Explorer to Pioneer. By no means is it a perfect choice for all the reasons I've already stated, but I think there's one particular benefit that outweighs all the downsides. I really believe this change could foreshadow that Wizards of the Coast will soon increase the attention it pays to the format. That's because I'm hopeful that making a big to-do about changing the name will attract a wave of standard-only Arena players to, pardon the pun, explore Pioneer. Arena is currently one of the most popular ways people play Magic the Gathering. Its player base is massive, but the vast majority of Arena players exclusively play Standard, and specifically Best of One Standard. It would be great if those players gave Pioneer a shot, even though I do think that the format is currently a lot stagnant and uninspired. An influx, nonetheless, of new players is exactly the kind of trend that could shake things up. For all of its flaws, Pioneer does serve a valuable role in the constructed Magic ecosystem. It's nice to have a non-rotating format consisting of relatively recent cards. It's especially nice that the format is a safe haven from Modern Horizons sets. And honestly, I love that there exists a non-rotating format without fetch lands. Without question, the best version of Magic the Gathering that can exist is a version where Pioneer is a fun, healthy, and above all popular format. And Magic the Gathering needs non-rotating formats just as much as it needs Standard. A thriving Standard is an integral part of the game. I've said this many times on this channel, and I'll continue saying it forever, but in order to mitigate the real cost of Standard rotation, there has to be a place for the cards that were once Standard viable to still see meaningful play outside of Standard. This is especially true on Arena, where you can't sell or trade your cards when they rotate. Modern just isn't that place anymore for anything but the absolute strongest Standard cards, as Modern has really become the Modern Horizons format. It isn't a home for your old favorite Standard cards that have rotated out of Standard. It's a place where you play Modern Horizons cards, and maybe some non-Modern Horizons cards. But in Pioneer, it's still a place where you get to play with non-Horizons cards. The problem is, no one really plays Pioneer. And I don't blame them. It's got a lot of serious systemic issues I may just get into in a future video. Among those issues is that Wizards of the Coast seems to pay very little attention these days to the format itself. There's very little opportunity for players to play Pioneer right now in paper. Formats thrive when they have both high player engagement and significant WotC attention. We saw it happen with Commander. The format's popularity has exploded ever since Wizards of the Coast started devoting significant resources to it. We're even seeing it happen in Standard right now. The format has more engagement from the player base ever since Wizards of the Coast moved to make the format more appealing. But while WotC's attention is valuable, that attention starts with the players. More people need to play Pioneer in order for Wizards of the Coast to put effort into improving Pioneer. And by putting Pioneer on Arena, even if it technically is only 80% of Pioneer, I have some hope that more players will play the format now than they did before. Who knows, if the popularity of the format grows enough, maybe Wizards of the Coast will spring to include that additional 20% of the format, even regardless of its competitive viability. After all, Arena is home to a massive population of casual players. If enough of those players start engaging with Pioneer, then they'll become a block worth catering to. Maybe I am being overly optimistic here, but I am genuinely hopeful that an influx of players into Pioneer via Arena could breathe new life into the format and convince Wizards of the Coast to invest more into what is supposed to be one of their premier formats. This solution is certainly far from perfect, but it is a step in the right direction towards improving the ecosystem and community of this game that we all love. My closing message to Wizards of the Coast is simply this: keep going, keep at it. This is great, but you're not done yet. But that is, of course, just my opinion, and now I want to hear from you. Do you think Arena Pioneer really is Pioneer, or is it still just Explorer? Are there cards that you wish Wizards of the Coast would add to the Arena client? And above all, does this announcement make you more interested in playing Pioneer, whether in paper or digital? Let me know in the comments below. And though the meta has changed a little bit since our last Pioneer episode of Shuffle Up and Play, you can still watch us shuffle up and play not on Arena, but in paper on that episode, which is linked in this video's description. What's up? It's Magic with Boomers, elderly boomers. Today, each of us was told to build Boomer Commander deck, and we don't know what anyone did.
I have a prize card. Whoever wins this will win the prize.
High
I would have built a
stakes.
different deck.
Let's team up against them. Take these kids to school.
That's right.
But Spice is good at Magic and you're not.
Flame tongue Kavu. Oh, good old fashioned.
There we
You love it.
go. Illusory terrain.
I'm playing Omnath, and I only have access to blue mana.
Commander is supposed to be about having fun with your friends.
I'm having fun. Are you not having fun?
It's like a 7-tiered nacho dip. That's how I build my decks.
Maybe don't be so antagonistic all the time.
I feel like I'm too young for this pod. I don't get these.